a lot of what Luke has said, but probably in quite a different way. And the first thing, and forgive me because I sometimes like to look at my notes, and just to say this is a really terrific initiative, and I'm looking at Jerry in the back, and Jerry, like the Dublin Quays project, which is 1986, and I know you've been doing some interesting research into it, 20 years ago. It strikes me that this project, I wish it well because I hope it may have the same profound influence that I believe the Quays project had. I mean, it was one of a number of initiatives that was happening around the mid-80s, and certainly, I've had occasion to pull it out, that document, that publication, and I do think it has had an influence. It's kind of interesting. So I just wanted to say that. So while these are your projects leading to your end of year marks and your thesis and all of that, you might also just bear in mind that this will influence your own careers. Likely you will draw on some of the thinking and discussions and debates, because they're bigger than just buildings. They're kind of social and political as well, and democratic. So I suppose remember this moment, but I'm also telling you this, you won't forget it. And the other thing I just want to say before I get on to the kind of topic of reuse is this term housing crisis. And I have to say I really kind of rally against the word crisis, and the reason being that I suppose as architects, I suppose the concern often is that crisis thinking leads to crisis results. And what we're talking about a lot of the time lasts for an awfully long time. And it's not to say that there isn't kind of very inventive things coming out of disasters and very creative thinking, but in a sense my worry is that by applying a crisis mentality, it somehow legitimizes solutions that maybe are short term. And I think, again, as architects, because we deal in the long term in a slower pace, we have to kind of push that debate a bit, even if it's politically expedient, to deliver kind of rapid solutions. So anyway, that's my kind of position on it. And then I suppose just to think about, there's a historic context to this, particularly when we're thinking of Dublin City. Now I'll go away from Dublin a bit and I'll come back to Dublin, but just even if we think about the last 100 years as we approach independence and all of the discussions in the last years, when we, the beginning of the 20th century, obviously didn't happen overnight, but as we arrived into independence, the city sat within, issues of housing, and there were real challenges for the city. And this is the frontispiece from the Abercrombie and Kelly Dublin of the Future publication. I'm not going to give you a history lecture because I've no doubt there are much bigger minds, and I'm not sure whether you've had some of this discussion, but it is kind of interesting to go back. This Harry Clark illustration on the frontispiece of what was a kind of an idea for how Dublin of the future might happen. And it wasn't just Dublin City, but it was the wider metropolitan area. But it painted a scenario of a kind of society and civic society and political society going up in flames, and then at the same time this kind of challenges of urban living, if I put it that way, and housing in the city. And again, the Civics Institute, and a lot of really interesting study and investigation going on at the time. And this is a quote from the Civic Survey from 1923: "Housing in Dublin today is more than a question and more than a problem. It is a tragedy." I could take that off and assign it to maybe some of the people you've had in talking to you and say that reflects. And again, kind of tapping into the theme of this morning, which is essentially reuse, even though you've given it a very provocative title, "Rip It Up and Start Again," which might send certainly Ruth and myself out here kicking on our backsides. That thinking, and excuse the kind of rather poor quality image here, but in a sense that thinking about city and existing buildings has been with us for a while, and in a way the concept of reuse has sat outside the mainstream of architecture up until relatively recently. I would argue, now you could challenge me, but up until in architectural thinking. And even again, this is from the Abercrombie plan, and it had drawings for new, what they were called tenement buildings, but new, I suppose, apartment blocks in the city, and at the same time then these mapping out the kind of scenario for the new suburban estates, the new garden cities on the edge of the city. And this attitude, and it could be summarised in, it may be questioned whether these tenements would be required, and the tenements referring to the new city apartments would be required if new houses and adequate transit facilities were to keep pace with the clearance of the existing slums. So in a sense, the attitude and the thinking being that let's move to the green field, it's easier, and let's abandon the city, which is the place of squalor. And in some ways, if you were to chart some of planning thinking, some of urban design or urban regeneration, we have found it much easier to create plans for the new, and it's been much more difficult and challenged to go back into the kind of messy context of the urban environment. And that's why I go back to things like the Dublin Quays project, because suddenly, well not suddenly, but it evolved. There were people thinking about the context and the value of the city and what you needed to do. So that's, I suppose, just to set that down. So I suppose, to cut to the chase, in a way, if you go back to your title, Rip It Up and Start Again, I don't think we have any choice in this. We can't do that, and we have to look at what we have. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why because I'm leaning mostly on a lot of thinking, but maybe why I'm influenced in my practice to think that this whatever project of reuse is important. And as I say, some of the thinking and some of the reading, some of the influence is outside of architecture. In fact, as I say, architecture has come to it relatively late. And I'll talk very simply about one point, and as I say, use and reuse is very important. And this is a project I came across. It was in Documenta, which is a contemporary art exhibition every 5 years in Kassel in Germany. And this, I'm sure you've probably come across the Astor Gates, who's actually a planner, ceramicist, and I think he studied religion. He's a Chicago artist. He takes existing buildings, or how he's found fame, I suppose, in a sense, is he's taken buildings, he's demolished other buildings and repaired the existing buildings with the bits he's demolished. But he was interviewed as part of the catalogue or the programme for Documenta on this project that he had repaired, and see this now. So to a question as to how he had created an elegance and taste in his projects which involved the mending of houses, he replied, "My knowledge of materials and my access to skilled people, plus time, created what you call taste. I believe that things in our lives should be cared for, and they should be used at their highest level of use. So part of what you saw was my willingness to care for things and invest in the care of them." And in a sense, projects Ruth has just shown have all been about care and use, and that's it has a profound impact on society. It kind of lifts the spirits to see something that is of an age and has been looked after well and continues to be used and continues to be useful. It's very simple, but actually a very profound thought. And of course, there's more significant pressures in a way, in terms of our targets for energy reduction. We've signed up to reducing energy consumption by 80% by the year 2050. And the implication of that is not a target, but the implication, as stated by the EU, is that in 2050, 90% of the existing building stock will still exist and will still be in use. So in a sense, that's a kind of a fallout of the targets. So us as architects operating in that sphere have to think, well, how do we make more use of this resource? And pulling out again, because I think it's we look at the building and we look at the kind of collective in the urban context. Jane Jacobs, and I see she's on your reading list, The Life and Death of Great American Cities, and Jane Jacobs also is not an architect, but has had a profound influence on place. She had a nice line about existing buildings. She said, an old building, she said, cities need old buildings so badly it is probably impossible for vigorous streets and districts to grow without them. By old buildings I mean not museum piece old buildings, not old buildings in an excellent and expensive state of rehabilitation, although these make fine ingredients, but also a good lot of plain, ordinary, low-value old buildings, including some run-down old buildings. And she's touching there, I suppose, on a social economic aspect, and in a sense maybe Ruth and myself have been a little privileged to work on maybe some of the well-repaired and well-invested buildings that need subvention. But in a way there's another challenge, and I suppose it's less glamorous for architecture, to just deal with the ordinary. And that's kind of important, because it's a really serious issue actually, because if it's so expensive to restore these buildings and do them up, then you have the kind of maybe less positive aspects of gentrification happen. So anyway, that's that. And then again, thinking about it, Desmond Morris, the anthropologist, in his great book, The Human Zoo, writes about the human animal requires a spatial territory in which to live that possesses unique features, surprises, visual oddities, landmarks, and architectural idiosyncrasies. And in a sense, I think that often our towns and our cities are a physical manifestation of that, because they have happened over time, and they're layered, and they're complex, and they're messy, and they're quirky, and all of those things that keeps us as human animals on our toes. And again, thinking about the concept of these, on our left we have this diagram that comes from, I think they're Belgian, I'm not sure what discipline they're coming from, but the diagram, which is an interesting one because it was used in a submission by the Institute of Public Health to the Urban Density, Sustainable Residential Guidelines that the department brought out in 2007. And the Institute of Public Health made a submission. This is really important because it goes again beyond as a kind of a health, but in a sense their vision for the kind of places that people need to live in are places that embrace the ecosystem, nature, but also right down to kind of community, economy, lifestyle, and people. And in some ways you could take that and you could take a cross-section through a vibrant town centre, a vibrant city centre, which has existing and new, and you could say that's the kind of thing that we have in that existing infrastructure. Heritage Council very simply did a little analysis of what's in character of an area, and again, won't go into it, but all the different bits and pieces. So in some ways, these complex systems are places in which communities live, and our place are certainly not ideal. There's lots of challenges, but to the question, do we rip it up and start again? You know, what I'm trying to communicate is what you lose by ripping it up in the first instance, but also as the architect coming into that space, the territory we have to understand. And so it's not just, you know, a nice site, there's many layers. And again, UNESCO brought out a very interesting document, and it's full of all kind of that international speak, so the language is a little bit, you know, bland or something, but it's what they call historic urban landscapes. And this was this definition of what a historic urban landscape is, and it describes it as it includes notably the site's topography, geomorphology, hydrology and natural features, its built environment, both historic and contemporary, its infrastructures above and below ground, its open spaces and gardens, its land use patterns and spatial organisation, perceptions and visual relationships, as well as all the other elements of the urban structure. Also includes social and cultural practices and values, economic processes, and the intangible dimensions of heritage as related to diversity and identity. So it's kind of a bit of a mind-blowing territory, but there's something, there's a time depth and there's a physical complexity. So really, that's the space. It's fabulous and it's fascinating and it's a wonderful territory to operate in. As I say, it is beyond physical. So that's a long introduction, right, to a number of, I don't know whether I call them case studies, because again, I'm kind of hovering high. I might go in with a little bit of a detail, but just in a sense trying to, grasp this a little bit conceptually. This is an interesting book by a chap called Fred Scott on altering architecture. He gave a talk here recently, and I suppose he's coming from interior architecture, but he talks, if a building is to be altered, the chances are it will be altered again. The designer therefore has responsibility for a building's past, its present, and indirectly its future.